There is a question that very few people have ever dared to ask publicly, and it is a question that once you start digging into it opens a door to a world so dark, so deeply hidden, and so terrifyingly connected that most people would rather pretend it does not exist. The question is simple. How did Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, a man born in absolute poverty in a village with no electricity, no running water, and no education, grow from picking avocados on a dirt farm in Aguililla, Michoacán, to controlling a $20 billion criminal empire that operates on 5 continents with connections to international banks, European criminal organizations, Asian chemical suppliers, and political figures at the highest levels of multiple governments? How does a man who was arrested in California for heroin distribution, deported back to Mexico with nothing to his name, somehow become the most powerful, most feared, and most protected drug lord in the entire Western Hemisphere? The official story is that El Mencho was simply smarter, more ruthless, and more strategic than everyone around him. That he saw opportunities others missed. That he built CJNG through pure force of will and violence. And there is truth in that. El Mencho was absolutely brilliant and absolutely ruthless. But there is a growing number of researchers, analysts, and investigators who believe that the official story is incomplete. That no single man, no matter how intelligent, no matter how violent, can build what El Mencho built without hidden hands helping him from the shadows. Without connections to networks so powerful and so secretive that they make the cartel itself look like a small business. The word that keeps appearing in these investigations, in these whispered conversations among intelligence analysts, and in classified reports that occasionally leak to the public, is one that most people associate with conspiracy theories, but that serious financial investigators have been tracking for decades: the Illuminati. Now, before you dismiss that word, let me be very clear about what we are actually talking about. We are not talking about a cartoon villain organization sitting in a castle somewhere plotting world domination. We are talking about a very real, very documented network of ultra-wealthy, ultra-powerful individuals, financial institutions, and political operatives who operate behind the scenes of global politics and global finance, and who have been credibly linked to the protection, facilitation, and profit-sharing of the international drug trade for over 50 years. The connection between the global elite and the drug trade is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented historical reality. And the story of El Mencho and CJNG fits into that reality in ways that are deeply disturbing. Let us start with the money, because the money is where every secret eventually reveals itself. CJNG under El Mencho generated an estimated $15 to $20 billion per year in revenue from drug trafficking, extortion, human smuggling, fuel theft, illegal mining, and other criminal enterprises. That is not a guess. That is based on seizure data, trafficking volume estimates, and financial intelligence gathered by the DEA, the U.S. Treasury Department, and Mexican financial authorities. Now here is the question that nobody in any government wants to answer publicly. Where did all that money go? $20 billion per year is not cash you can stuff under a mattress. It is not money you can hide in a hole in the ground. $20 billion per year requires a financial infrastructure so vast and so sophisticated that it must by mathematical necessity involve legitimate financial institutions. Banks. International banks. The kind of banks that have glass towers in London and New York and Zurich and Hong Kong. The kind of banks whose board members attend the World Economic Forum in Davos every January. The kind of banks that are supposedly regulated by the most powerful governments on Earth. If this is already making you think differently about how the world actually works, smash that like button and subscribe right now, because what comes next is going to change everything you thought you knew. In 2012, HSBC, one of the largest banks in the world, was caught laundering approximately $881 million from Mexican drug cartels, including the Sinaloa cartel. The bank paid a $1.9 billion fine. Not a single executive went to prison. Not one. The fine represented roughly 5 weeks of HSBC profits. It was the cost of doing business. In 2014, JPMorgan Chase paid a $2.6 billion settlement related to its failure to flag suspicious transactions connected to Bernie Madoff, but internal investigations also revealed that the bank had processed billions in transactions that originated from regions and entities known to be connected to drug money. In 2018, Danske Bank was exposed for laundering approximately $230 billion through its Estonian branch, much of it connected to Russian organized crime, but financial investigators noted that the same laundering pipelines were used by Latin American drug trafficking organizations. Wachovia Bank, now part of Wells Fargo, was caught in 2010, having processed $378 billion in transactions connected to Mexican drug cartels. $378 billion. The fine was $160 million. Less than 2% of the bank profits for 1 year. No executives were charged. No one went to prison. These are not conspiracy theories. These are federal court cases. These are settlements. These are documented facts sitting in public court records that anyone can access. And they reveal something that the financial establishment does not want you to understand. The global banking system is not accidentally involved in the drug trade. It is structurally dependent on it. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime estimated in 2009 that approximately $352 billion in drug money is laundered through the global financial system every single year. That money provides liquidity to banks that would otherwise face cash shortfalls. It funds investments. It generates fees. It creates profits. And the people who sit at the top of these financial institutions, the people who attend the same conferences, dine at the same restaurants, sit on the same boards, and belong to the same clubs as the political leaders who publicly declare war on drugs, these people know exactly where that money comes from. They have always known. And this is where Mencho enters the picture. Because CJNG did not launder its billions through neighborhood check cashing stores. CJNG laundered its money through a network so sophisticated that the U.S. Treasury Department described it as one of the most significant money laundering organizations in the world. That network was Los Queenies, the Gonzalez Valencia family clan, led by Mencho wife Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia and her brothers. Los Queenies operated through shell companies registered in Panama, the British Virgin Islands, Luxembourg, and other offshore financial centers. They used trade-based money laundering, importing and exporting goods at manipulated prices to move money across borders without triggering banking alerts. They invested in real estate developments in Jalisco, Nayarit, Puerto Vallarta, and Guadalajara. They owned shopping centers, restaurants, construction companies, and agricultural businesses. They used Chinese underground banking networks known as the Chinese Money Exchange or Fei Qian system to convert drug dollars into yuan and then back into pesos or dollars through trade transactions between Chinese manufacturers and Mexican importers. If you are starting to see how deep this rabbit hole goes, you need to subscribe right now and hit that bell icon, because we are about to connect dots that nobody else is connecting. The Chinese connection is one of the most critical and least discussed elements of CJNG financial architecture. CJNG imported massive quantities of chemical precursors from Chinese manufacturers through the port of Manzanillo in Colima. These precursors were used to produce methamphetamine and fentanyl in industrial-scale laboratories hidden in the mountains of Jalisco and Michoacán. But the relationship with Chinese suppliers was not just about chemicals. It was also about money. The Chinese underground banking system allowed CJNG to move billions of dollars internationally without ever touching a traditional Western bank. Here's how it worked. A drug buyer in the United States would pay cash to a Chinese money broker in Los Angeles or New York. That broker would contact a counterpart in Guangzhou or Shanghai. The Chinese counterpart would then release an equivalent amount of money in pesos to a CJNG-associated account in Mexico. The cash in the United States would be used by Chinese importers to purchase American goods or would be deposited into Chinese bank accounts. No money actually crossed any border. No wire transfer was made. No bank compliance officer ever saw a suspicious transaction. The system was virtually invisible to law enforcement, and it moved billions. Now here is where things get even more disturbing. The same Chinese underground banking networks that CJNG used are also used by Chinese state-connected enterprises to move money internationally. Some researchers have pointed out that the Chinese government, which maintains extensive oversight of its financial system, must be aware that these networks exist and must at some level tolerate them. Whether that tolerance is passive or active is a question that intelligence agencies have been trying to answer for years. But the implication is staggering. It suggests that the financial infrastructure supporting the most violent drug cartel in Mexican history intersects with state-level financial systems in ways that go far beyond simple criminal activity. And China is not the only state-level connection. In Europe, CJNG established distribution networks through partnerships with the Italian 'Ndrangheta, one of the most powerful and most secretive criminal organizations in the world. The 'Ndrangheta controls an estimated 80% of Europe cocaine trade and has documented connections to Italian political figures, financial institutions, and even the Vatican banking system. The 'Ndrangheta has been investigated multiple times for its connections to Masonic lodges in Italy, particularly the infamous Propaganda du P2 Lodge, which was exposed in 1981 as a secret society operating within the Italian government military and financial system with connections to the CIA, the Vatican Bank, and international arms dealers. P2 was not a conspiracy theory. It was a documented secret organization with a membership list that included heads of Italian intelligence, military generals, media moguls, bankers, and politicians. Its Grand Master Licio Gelli was convicted of multiple crimes, including connection to terrorist attacks and financial fraud. And the criminal organizations that P2 was connected to, including elements that evolved into the modern 'Ndrangheta, are the same organizations that CJNG partnered with to distribute drugs across Europe. This is where the story gets real. If you want to understand how the world actually works, not the version they show you on the news, but the version that operates in the shadows, you need to like this video, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Now let us talk about political protection, because no criminal organization can operate at the scale CJNG operated without political protection at the highest levels. In Mexico, the relationship between drug cartels and the political establishment has been documented for decades. The PRI, the political party that ruled Mexico for 71 consecutive years, maintained what analysts have described as a managed relationship with drug traffickers. Cartels were allowed to operate as long as they paid a percentage of their profits to political figures, kept violence below certain thresholds, and did not challenge the political system directly. This arrangement broke down in the 2000s when the PAN party took power and launched a military offensive against the cartels. But the underlying connections between criminal money and political power never disappeared. They simply became less visible. In Jalisco, CJNG rise coincided with a period of remarkable political stability for the organization. Despite being the most violent cartel in Mexico, CJNG operated from Jalisco with relatively little interference from state authorities for years. Researchers have documented numerous cases of Jalisco state officials, police commanders, and local politicians who were on CJNG payroll. In 2018, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted several Mexican officials for accepting bribes from CJNG. But the political protection extended beyond Mexico. In the United States, the DEA has acknowledged that CJNG operates in at least 40 American cities. The cartel has distribution cells in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Houston, Atlanta, and dozens of other metropolitan areas. These cells move drugs worth billions of dollars through American communities every year. And the question that no one in Washington wants to answer is, how is it possible that a foreign criminal organization can operate distribution networks in 40 American cities for over a decade without being dismantled? The DEA is the most well-funded, most technologically advanced drug enforcement agency in the world. The FBI, the NSA, the CIA, and the Department of Homeland Security all have resources dedicated to counter-narcotics operations. And yet CJNG continued to expand inside the United States year after year. Some analysts have suggested that the answer lies in the same dynamic that has existed since the Iran-Contra scandal of the 1980s, when the CIA was documented to have facilitated drug trafficking by Nicaraguan Contra rebels to fund covert operations in Central America. The relationship between intelligence agencies and drug trafficking organizations is one of the most well-documented and least discussed aspects of modern geopolitics. The CIA involvement with drug trafficking in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War through the Golden Triangle opium trade has been documented by multiple journalists and congressional investigations. The CIA relationship with Afghan opium producers during the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s has been documented extensively. And the Iran-Contra affair proved beyond any doubt that elements within the U.S. government were willing to facilitate drug trafficking when it served strategic geopolitical objectives. We are getting into territory that most channels will never touch. So if you appreciate this kind of deep investigative content, do me a favor right now, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications because this is the kind of content that changes how you see the world. The question is whether similar dynamics apply to the modern relationship between intelligence agencies and organizations like CJNG. And while no public evidence directly proves that any U.S. intelligence agency actively facilitated CJNG operations, several circumstantial factors raise serious questions. First, the speed of CJNG rise. No criminal organization in history has grown as fast as CJNG did between 2010 and 2025. From a regional splinter group to a global criminal empire operating on 5 continents in just 15 years. That kind of growth requires more than just violence and drug profits. It requires access to financial systems, logistics networks, and political protection that go far beyond what a single criminal organization can build on its own. Second, the tolerance of CJNG chemical precursor imports. CJNG imported thousands of tons of chemical precursors from China through the port of Manzanillo over a period of more than a decade. These shipments were massive. They were regular. They followed predictable patterns. And yet they continued year after year despite the fact that both the U.S. and Mexican governments had the intelligence capability to identify and intercept them. Third, the geopolitical utility of the drug trade. The global drug trade generates an estimated $500 billion to $1 trillion per year. That money flows through the international financial system, providing liquidity to banks, funding covert operations, and creating leverage over political figures and institutions worldwide. Some researchers have argued that the drug trade is not a problem the global elite is trying to solve. It is a system the global elite is managing for its own benefit. The Illuminati in this context is not a single organization with a membership card and a secret handshake. It is a network, a web of financial institutions, intelligence agencies, political figures, and criminal organizations that are all connected through money, through power, and through the shared understanding that the drug trade is too profitable, too useful, and too deeply embedded in the global economy to ever be truly eliminated. Mencho may never have sat in a room with a banker from Zurich or a CIA station chief or a member of a European royal family. He may never have known the names of the people at the very top of the financial food chain who profited from the drugs his organization produced and shipped. But the money he generated flowed upward through a system designed to capture it. From the streets of Los Angeles and Chicago, through Chinese underground banks, through offshore shell companies, through European distribution networks, through international financial institutions, and ultimately into the same pools of capital that fund the legitimate global economy. Mencho was not outside the system. He was a part of it, an essential part. The part that does the dirty work, that generates the raw cash, that takes the risks, and that absorbs the violence so that the people at the top never have to get their hands dirty. And now that Mencho is dead, the system has not changed. The money still flows. The banks still process it. The political connections still protect it. The chemical precursors still arrive at Manzanillo. The drugs still cross the border. The only thing that changed is the name at the bottom of the pyramid. Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez L3, the American-born stepson, now sits where Mencho sat. And the network above him, the bankers, the brokers, the politicians, the intelligence operatives, the people who some call the Illuminati and others simply call the global elite, those people are still in place, still profiting, still protected, and still invisible. The real power in the drug trade was never held by the men whose faces appear on wanted posters. It was held by the people whose faces never appear anywhere at all. And that is the secret that no government, no intelligence agency, and no cartel boss has ever been willing to expose, because exposing it would mean exposing the entire system that keeps the modern world running exactly the way it is. If you made it to the end of this documentary, you are someone who wants to understand the truth, not the comfortable version they feed you on mainstream media. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and drop a comment telling me what you think. Is the Illuminati connection real? Or is it just a theory? I will see you in the next one.